Hey everybody, it's a little bit after 1, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Brian with SMMware, and today we'll be doing a general overview of all the various features within SMMware. We have 4 different sections that we're going to consider. We're going to start with the center section in blue, working our way through clients and sales leads and jobs. Talk about entering hours and expenses. Then we'll talk about invoices. We'll talk a little bit about file management, and that'll be our first section, again, the section in blue. If you have comments throughout the webinar, you're free to add them over in the section on the right-hand side of your screen, the chat section, and I will answer them as I see them. And again, welcome. My name is Brian with SMMware. We're starting off here on the home page, and we'll go to the Sales Leads Manager. Some people call this estimates. There's an area in the settings editor that lets you use your own terminology, but the official name is a sales lead. And here we're looking at the overall listing of sales leads in the system. We have a filter at the top. Throughout SMMware, there's you're going to see these filters that allow you to shape what the listing has. And right now we have it set for the sales leads of all different status levels. The most common setting is going to be in progress or current. We also have a sales report that shows you some information about your sales efforts. We have the number of entries in a given status level here, along with the total dollar signs for it and total hours under that category. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got a report that shows you by value, by hours, and by quantity. And that's relevant because sometimes you have only a few sales leads, but they are quite large. So you're actually doing pretty well compared to maybe have a large number of sales leads, but they're on the smaller side. So that's actually a little bit more trouble. So you might prefer to have a few larger ones. But in any case, this report will break down for you how you're doing. And then down below, we have the listing. Go ahead and create a new sales lead. We're going to assume that you have an incoming phone call. If you had, if the phone call was from someone who you already worked with, you can pick them from the list of clients. If they are brand new to you, you can create a record on the fly. Fill in various information about them as a client. SMMware has 3 fields that handle who referred the business to you: the category, which is the most broad, the company, and then the most granular is the person. And in the referral report, that will help you break down the information in a useful way. And while we're here, I'll also point out that you can indicate that you have a client representative and what the relationship is, whether it's the adult child or an attorney. So if you have a power of attorney type situation, you can indicate who the attorney is. This will become more relevant later on, where someone has said that they're willing to act as a reference. And in the beginning, they'll be marked as unasked. And then later on, you can talk to them and say yes or no. We also have some custom fields here. These are fields that relate to them as a person, and they don't change as they move from place to place. Mobility issues, for instance, if they are using a walker, that will still be true when they move to a new location. Within SMMware, one of the ways that we help you out is that if you work with the same locations on a regular basis, such as the Senior Living Center, they can appear in this list, and you can simply pick them in order to fill in the address. That way you're not having to go find it and cut and paste it. So we're back into our main sales lead now that we've created our clients, and we can indicate the different status levels. Again, the most common one is being in progress. And after you've given a quote to them and you're waiting to hear from them, that's when it becomes submitted. Then obviously we have won and declined. Suspended is for when they have to put things on hold for a while. And a casual inquiry is a level where you don't expect them to hire you anytime soon. This is someone who called and just wanted some information. Maybe they're very early on in the process. These different status levels are auditable, but this is what you would get in a default new system. Here we have some more custom fields that indicate information about this particular work. And those are different than the client custom fields, which were about them as a person. So when you move from place to place, the gate code or which day the elevator code or which day the garbage comes, that can all change. And this is the kind of place where you can put that. Again, these custom fields are all customizable. You don't have to have the mover name or realtor name. You can have what you care to. We also have a system for providing quotes. So if you want to give them a quote, you can start the process here. We offer a system of templating. This is what a 3-level template looks like. And again, you can create your own templates. You can say small, medium, large jobs. You can say downsize and pack, or just strictly the sorting and organizing, or however you care to arrange your templates, you can. The quotes within SMMware are a question of using these different blocks. Each one of these outline blocks is something you can work with. I'm going to go ahead and insert another header block right below the one we have here. The various other kinds of blocks we have involve the line items, so the number of hours, the rates. The areas in gray are being calculated for you, so then you can just modify the other areas. You'll notice that we pulled in the client's information here. Now that I have saved it, I can go ahead and view a PDF. It actually does normally open in the browser. I'm not sure why this time it did not. I'll have to fix that. I think that's a browser setting that somehow got changed. And here is the PDF that was generated. So you can get a sense of what you would be sending to the client. Your header would, of course, be your own. This is just a generic one. You can also, if I had entered an email address, attach the quote as a PDF attachment for the email. And if someone calls you up and they say that they like your quote, but that they would like some changes, what we can do is have a new copy. And then we can make a note about why we are creating this new copy. When we're done working with the quote, we can go ahead and return to the main sales lead. And you can see here's an opportunity to create a new quote. And here's the first quote we created as well as the second. And after you have won the work, you can create a job from the quote. Here's where we can set a sales lead. And if we had entered information in for the custom fields, it would carry over here. You'll notice here is where SMMware tells you which sales lead this was created from. I'll go ahead and show you what it's like to upload files within SMMware. You can upload PDFs, Excel files, Word documents, as well as images. And when you're on a mobile device, you can multi-select just as I am here on the desktop. This list of tags is something you can customize from the settings editor as well. And I'm going to rename these so that instead of having those long random file names, that we can have something a little more readable, something that you can discuss with other people. And here are the files that were just uploaded. I can click on these to get a larger view. Scroll back and forth. I can also rename them, rotate them, change the tag that was used. Here's where I can enter a note. I think, say down here. You can also download the files, share them, and of course, delete them. We have the regular file manager where basic level employees can see the entries here. We also have a restricted file manager, which is for administrators. So if you wanted to, you could upload a PDF with a signed contract here and have it limited to just the administrators. From here, we'll go ahead and record some hours. And I will change to enter hours for someone else. Since I'm an administrator, I can do that. If I was a low-level employee, I would just not have this drop down and I would only enter hours for myself. I can hand type a description into the field, or I can pick from this list. And if you're on a phone, it's handy to be able to avoid some thumb typing that way. For vani, there are as many system administrators as you care to have. So I'll go ahead and take a look at the associate profiles to explain that a little bit more fully. So I went to Associates and Associate Manager. Go ahead and look at this profile. And this drop-down gives you a general sense of someone's permission levels, whether it's senior admin, admin, team leader, or normal user, or company owner. And down below that, there's some more granular permissions where you can set read and write or none for things like the sales role privilege, for HR. The scheduling role determines whether someone can access the master calendar at all, and whether they can just read it or whether they can read and write. So it's pretty flexible in terms of how you can arrange permissions for your associates. From a licensing point of view, there's nothing in it about how many system administrators you get. It's just number of total accounts. Coming back here to recording our hours and mileage. If I worked at one place in the morning and one place in the afternoon, I can enter both of those at once. So this top section is where you can create your new entries. And the bottom section is where you can see existing entries. And they will be here until the job closes out, at which time we hide them so that the list does not go on for forever. You can mark them as billable or not. We also have pay levels, which I should touch on. I think I'll go back to the associate manager for that. Here's the section where you can set up the pay levels for a given associate. You define your various levels in the settings editor. This system has team member weekend, team lead weekend, and they get a different rate for each one of those. And that works in conjunction with what day of the week they're putting the hours in if you are not using job codes. And then if you are using something that we'll talk about in a moment called job codes, the pay levels can be tied to those. For vani, by all means, go ahead and ask as many questions as you have. Yes, they select from the list of open jobs. Once the job has been closed, it will drop out of that listing so that it doesn't go on and just get longer and longer for forever. And it also prevents people from entering hours against a job that's a year old or something like that. Moving on, we're going to look at recording your expenses. And again, I'll pick someone else to enter expenses on behalf of. Entering a date, picking a job. And in this case, we're going to put in the total amount. And we'll pick a vendor. This radio button indicates whether the company credit card was used, which case you would use company, or if the employee paid out of pocket and needs to be reimbursed, in which case you would mark it as reimbursable. And again, you can mark this as billable or not. You can also upload a receipt. And again, we have a list of predefined terms that you can pick from, and you can configure that in the settings editor. And again, our top section is where you create your new entries, and the bottom section is where you can see your existing entries. Once an item has been added to an invoice, you cannot edit it. So it'll just say invoice, say like 20-1080, or if it's not an invoice and if it's not approved, you can edit or delete it. Okay, having created our hourly and expense line items, we can talk about, I think, invoicing. Before we do that, I'll talk about the approval system. SMMware has an optional one where before something can appear on an invoice that it would have to be approved. And again, this is probably something that you want if you are a if this is something that you want if you're a larger organization, then you want to be able to approve things. If you're a smaller organization, it's probably a step that you don't need to do. For Sue, you would probably create like a cash vendor that indicates that you paid that way. That was regarding about paying for an expense out of petty cash. So if we have a given job, let's see if we can find one that has some unapproved items. Okay, so this is what you would see when you have some entries that have not yet been approved. You just go ahead and mark them as approved. And you can also reject it if you need to. And when you're done, you just go ahead and update your items. And once the items are approved, then they can appear on an invoice. And again, that approval system is optional and is probably most appropriate for larger organizations. Okay, we're looking at our list of invoices. Go ahead and take a look at a detailed one. SMMware supports two different kinds of invoices, the flat fee and itemized. This particular one is itemized. We also have different status levels. When you first create one, it'll be preliminary, and that is a way of indicating to other people that they shouldn't move forward with it. Then after that, once it's ready, you can mark it as finalized, and that allows team leads to approve them, which is also optional. So if you don't want to get team leads involved, there's a setting for turning that off, and then you can simply mark it as approved yourself. I'm going to go ahead and roll this back to being finalized for a moment, just so we can take a look at that. And a given invoice has a date range. The idea being that if you have a longer job, let's say it lasts for 4 months and you want to bill them each month, then you can put in the date range so as to indicate what you're billing them for. And then you scan for the line items. It will pull them in automatically. We also allow you to edit the descriptions that the employees put in. So that way, if you have someone who's not clear, then you can clean that up from here. Rather than going back line item by line item, edit, change, edit the next one, change it, you can do all of them right from here. We also have a note that will appear on the invoice. You can say thank you for your business or whatever else you want to do to personalize it. And we have a note that is not going to be seen by the client. And again, we are saving you time for going to look up addresses. Sometimes you need to send the invoice to where they're living now. Sometimes you need to send it where they're moving to. So, and only you are going to know which one is appropriate at the moment. So we give you that list to pick from. I'm going to go ahead and mark this as approved again. Once the item is approved, then instead of having the scan for line items and editing the date range, now we have these buttons about generating PDFs. We have 3 different formats that you can pick from at any given time. We've got the summary format, which is as basic as it gets. It just has a single entry for the overall categories like labor and expenses. Then we have the detailed format. Again, my browser normally opens these up directly from within the browser. I have to figure out why my browser changes its mind about doing that. And here's the detailed version where it has a line item for every single entry that is attributed to the job. So if you have a day where 3 employees worked, you'll have 3 line items. For a longer job, then perhaps the invoice can become quite long. And we offer you a third format, which is meant as a compromise between the very short and the very long. This is called the roll-up version. And what it does is roll up all the entries for a given day into a single line item. And it tells you how many employees were working that day. So if we did have 3 people working on a given day, we just see number of associates 3, and we see the grand total number of hours and the grand total charges for those hours. This section is where you can create adjustments and you can take account of deposits. And throughout SMMware, we have various little shortcuts that are handy. You'll notice that there's a button here next to the job. And once we're on the job, we can use this similar shortcut to jump back to the client profile. The client profile is kind of the hub for that particular client. You can see that over time, we've done 3 jobs for this client, and we had 1 sales lead in the system for them. And that pretty well gives us an introduction to that section. Again, we started talking about sales leads and clients, talked about jobs. We talked about hourly and expense entries, talked about invoices, and along the way, we talked about working with files. So now we're going to look at this section in green, and it addresses organizations and contacts. And within SMMware, what that means is the organization is a company that you work with, like a senior living center or a realtor. And then the contact is somebody who works for that company. Here in the main menu, we go to organizations and the organization manager. And by default, you can see a categorized listing of all the different organizations you work with. So that way, if you want to see all of the different realtors that you know, you come down to real estate and check those out. And we can go through all the other categories. You can also export this list as a CSV file. You can look at it alphabetically. When you create a new organization, you can indicate which category it goes in, and you can actually assign it to multiple categories. So if you have a business partner and you can't agree that on what the right category is, you can actually have both. About the rest of the usual information. I'll point out that you can also upload files here. So for instance, if you have a senior living center who gives you a PDF that has all their standard floor plans, this is a place where you can store that and everyone will have that to go to. It's a very logical place to go look for that kind of information. We haven't talked about tasks and notes and calls yet. We will shortly. but I wanted to point out that they are also available under the organization. Here's a spot where we can create a new contact for this organization. And fill out the rest of the information down below. And we can jump back to the parent organization from there. Since I mentioned shortcuts before, I'd also like to show you the search functionality. The search results come back divided up into client records, organization records, contacts, and employees, if applicable. So it's fairly typical that if you need to find a client record, instead of going to the client listing and then maybe paging through a couple of them, that you would just do a quick search and get to them that way. For vani, yes, the organizations would be the senior living facilities or consignment stores. The organizations is a mixture of people that you recommend, like plumbers maybe. It's people who recommend you, like maybe a senior living center or a realtor. And it is also vendors where you spend money with. So if you buy packing supplies. So any one of those, that's why it's got the generic name organizations, is because it's not just vendors, it's not just people who recommend you. It's more like external companies. All right, so that's one of the shorter legs of our tour, we're talking about organizations and contacts. Next, we will go into the calendars, task notes, and calls. Actually start with looking at a job and the tasks for that job. So I've opened a job for editing. As I scroll down towards the bottom, there's a section for tasks. If a task is late, it'll have red for the date. That way it'll draw your attention. You can see who created this task and who they assigned it to. I'm going to go ahead and create a new task now. And one of the main aspects of a task is when it's due. You can set a couple of reminders for yourself. We can also set priorities and status later on, the most important one, of course, being finished. We can assign it to someone. And then going back to the main view, see the overall list of the tasks. If you want to see both the shorter description plus the longer, or the shorter summary plus the longer description, this button right here will pop up that whole thing. So that way you can get a sense of all the tasks all at once. And as you work with the system, eventually you're going to realize that you're creating similar tasks from one job to the next, and you probably would like a way to work with multiple tasks as a way of saving some time. And we offer something called a task group, and this is also configurable, so you can have yours be different than what you see here. Right now we've got each one of these buttons representing multiple tasks. So if I pick pre-sale consultation, we can see that there are in fact 1, 2, 3 tasks here, and that the information is pre-filled. That way it promotes the consistency of language because you only change it when you need to. Otherwise, the language will just stay at the default. Again, it's just like a suggestion. The text that's put in there, you can override it however you care to. And you can override who this is assigned to or the priority. You can set a couple of reminders. And out of these tasks, if you don't need one of them, you can just click on the X to get rid of it. And this also helps with consistency because if you start with a list of the 10 things that usually apply and you remove the ones that don't apply right now, you're less likely to forget one. Where on the other hand, if you're building that list of 10 from memory, then you might skip one by mistake. So this approach enforces consistency in 2 ways. So that was the tasks section. We also offer notes. Notes are a lot simpler than tasks. The text that you're seeing here is also something you can configure. This one happens to be expecting a daily report. And the idea is that these headers give you, as the person entering the note, an expectation of what you need to put in. So what kind of work was done, which rooms you worked in, and so on and so forth. And then if you don't need that in this particular case, you can just get rid of the entire text. And again, you can see when the note was created, and you can see who created it. That way, if you have questions, you know who to talk to. And also, if there's a later note that contradicts the earlier one, it's probably safe to assume that the later one is the most up to date. And again, you have a button that you can push to see the entirety of the notes that were entered into the system, so that you don't have to go one by one if you want to see all the details. Next, we have a section for calls. You can use this to record either calls that came in spontaneously, and so now they're in the past, or you can use it to plan future calls. So we'll put this one out in early next week or late next week. And now that we're talking about phone calls, we care about whether you're calling them or they're calling you. And of course, what phone number is to be called. So this might be a sales call. And again, you can set yourself reminders. So those are the tasks, notes, and calls section. From here, I'm going to jump over to the home page to talk a little bit more about exactly those. So we have some sections here that are related to tasks. Before I dive in, I'm going to talk about the status boards. So we have 2 different status boards. One is called Status Board for Ops, and the idea here is to give you a 30,000-foot view of how things are going across the company. So for Ops, that's operations or jobs, your ongoing work. And you can change the note on the fly here. You can indicate whether everything's going well, or you can flag it or mark it for an alert. These tags, again, are also configurable, so you don't have to have just 3. You can assign whatever labels, however many tags you want, and whatever colors you want. We have a similar status board for sales, for your sales efforts. And this one is marked as hot lead, cold lead, medium lead. But again, you can configure that as you like. So now back to the idea of tasks. This is the section called My Tasks. On the home page, various sections start with the word My, and that means that it's going to be customized for you. So these are all tasks that were assigned to me, whether I'm the one who created them and assigned it to myself, or if someone else created it and assigned it to me. There are similar sections for tasks which I created and handed off to somebody else. If I am a system administrator, then I'll have access to this section, which is company-wide, and it shows you all the tasks in the company that are incomplete. So Shane, you want to print off you would like me to make a printout of these pages. I'll talk to you afterwards to figure out exactly what you would like to see, and I'd be happy to provide a printout for you for sure. The next section is about tasks that were recently completed. Let's go ahead and mark one of these as complete. I'll mark it as finished, and it'll assume that the time of now is when it was done. I can override that if I want to. So now we can see a task that was recently completed. And it will stay here for 5 days, after which time it'll drop off. We can also see a listing of calls. If you are using the approval system for invoices, then they will appear here for team leads to go ahead and mark as approved. And if you are also using the optional approval system for the hours and expenses, and if I'm the team lead for a job, then the hours and expenses would appear here for me to approve. I would jump over to the details using the view button. In a regular system, this probably would not be quite so long. If you are someone who created an entry and then it got rejected, then it would appear here so that you can edit it and resubmit it to the system. And then from there, it goes back to the team lead for approval. The next sections, we have team leads, or this is your teams where you're the team lead, because we know that it's common for someone to act as a team lead on one job, any team member on another. So when you look at a contact, they can be marked as somebody who sends business to you. And if you haven't talked to them in a long time, that makes them quote unquote stale for you. And this listing goes to the system and it orders them by the ones that are the most, or where it's been the longest since you've spoken to them. So the idea here is that if you work through this list and keep the date of last contact recent, then you will never find yourself in a situation where somebody's mad at you for something and then they become even more mad because you haven't noticed that they're not talking to you. So you just work through this list and you can avoid that. Next, we have a list of 10 clients who are willing to act as a reference. This is for someone in sales who's going to go into a sales call. And then we have a list of 10 clients where you have not yet, the job is now over, but you haven't asked them whether they're willing to act as a reference or not. So then we want to take care of that. And if you work through this list, then it will always keep this one fresh. I'll touch on this one right now. This is about invites. We're going to be talking about the calendar in a moment. And one of the approaches for managing your attendees is invites. And you can manage your invites here, where you can mark it as where you want to be part of that event, or you can say that you're not available. And for now, just notice that there is a section here where you can indicate that, and I'll provide the details about it shortly. At the bottom of this page, the section is called My Schedule. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's only showing events where I am either an attendee or I'm the main contact for that event. But this is not the master calendar where you can see everything across the entire company. That is here. This main menu item can appear here directly under the main menu. There's an option for tucking it away underneath the admin menu if that's your preference. So I'm jumping over here to the master calendar. And now we are, in fact, looking at everything across the entire company. One thing to be aware of for the master calendar are these various tags. And these are customizable. You can tie a given event tag to jobs, to sales. That way you can use color to know what an event is about. So the most common approach, or the most straightforward approach, is to have tags that indicate whether an event is for a job or for sales, so the green and this tan. Another approach that I've seen used is to have tags that indicate the kind of work that's being done. And that's where something like pack and unpack might come in. And a third approach I've seen is to have tags related to who the project lead is. So we have Judy, Carmen, and Margot tags, and you can see some events for them around the calendar. So again, the bottom line is that we're trying to use color so that you can tell something about the event at a glance. So what you're looking at here embedded in the calendar itself is just a brief summary. It's got the name of the client and it's got the initials for the people who are working on it. But we can click on any one of these and get a pop-up, and it provides additional detail. You can also notice that there is a link to their address. What we're doing here is handing you off to a mapping function, and this works just fine on a mobile device as well as on a desktop. And once you are here, you are going to be getting your turn-by-turn directions from that mapping service, whether it's Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever. So now I'm going back into SMMware. You'll notice that instead of just the initials, here in the pop-up, you can see the full name of the people who are attending, and you can see the time span that they're going to be there. So let's go ahead and create a new event for June 3rd. Here's where we're going to indicate that this event is part of a job or a sales lead. And I'm just going to say it's part of a job. I'll pick which job it's part of. And I'm also going to use this link to insert the address. Once we save this and go back to the main calendar, this little blob of text here is what becomes the link to the mapping functionality. We can skip notifications if needs be. SMMware will normally notify people that they've been added to an event or that the event has changed, but you're at your discretion for overriding that. I can mark who the main contact is. When people get notification about an event, it's going to say that if they have any questions, that they should talk to, say, Sally, and it'll have her phone number and email address. We can also set a couple of reminders here. We can also mark the event as being tentative. And next, we can talk about how we manage who the attendees are. There are 3 different approaches in SMMware, and each one has its own way of thinking about things. They are direct, invite, and availability. I'll go ahead and switch this to direct. And the thinking for this one is that you've already discussed who's going to do the work. You simply need to formalize it and put it in the system. So we will check mark the various folks, and they will get notification that they are now part of this event. So it's not really an invite situation. This is more or less an assignment. From Raj, I'm not sure I understand the question. For employment, regarding the employment options, perhaps you could clarify that and I'd be happy to give an answer. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and discuss the direct approach a little bit further. So again, this is the direct where it's an assignment situation. And moving on, we'll talk about invites. Once you're talking about invites, things are a little different. When you are having a social gathering and you invite 10 people, if only 8 people show up, that's presumably fine. In a business event, that is probably not so fine. So we're going to specify the team size, which is the number of people. If the number of people is 3 here, we're going to mark them below. And we can indicate a respond by date here. So that is a way of telling people that they need to let you know if they're interested or not by a certain date. And let's see, I've invited more people than I need. So the idea here is that you're going to go through a round of assignment that you'll invite, say, like 8 people. And let's say that 5 of them respond back that they're interested. And then out of those 5, you can pick the final 3. So the invite system allows you to use it that way, but also on a first come, first serve approach. So that if I just invite 3 people, well, I'm sorry, if I invite 8 people and I want to use first come, first serve, then the first 3 people who respond will get a notification saying that you're now part of the team. And then after that, the people get a response saying, I'm sorry, the team is full. And another approach is to use multiple rounds of invitations. And if I'm going to do that, I'll probably give it a high number for the team size so that nobody gets rejected. And I'll just invite the 3 people that I want. And if one of them can't come, I'll come in and add another person, and they'll get their invite, and I'll just keep going until I have a full team. Moving on, I'm going to talk about availability. So this is tied to the idea that employees will enter when they can and cannot work. So I can come here, and as an administrator, I can pick someone instead of just myself. And I can, let's go into next week. I can indicate that I cannot work on that morning, Friday morning, or maybe I'm not going to work Monday. And I can edit that entry, stretch it around, drag it around. And if I don't need it, I can just click on it to get rid of it. And then after everybody has done this and entered their unavailability, they can, that information will be pulled into this view here. So here we have a listing of all the employees. And we have when they're available. There will be chunks missing if they were part of an event. Let's move it into the next week to see if we can find something where there's a few chunks missing. So these are some folks that are part of an event already. They were marked. And we're going to go ahead and pick somebody to work on the event. This is our most flexible approach because it does not assume that everyone's arriving and leaving at the same time. The direct and the invite approaches do assume that everyone's arriving and leaving together. Whereas this approach, you can mark somebody as arriving and leaving whenever you need them to be. And after I have picked everybody, I can go ahead and save that. And you can see the folks that were added to the event. And as things change, which they inevitably do, let's say that Marion calls up and says she can't attend. We're going to go ahead and click on where it says assigned. And that marks her as being released. And after we save this, then there's going to be a gap where she used to be assigned. On the other hand, if the client calls you up and says that you can't do some of the work for whatever reason, now you don't need as many people as you thought. So we're going to take Judy off of this event. But in this particular case, she could work on some other event. So we're going to click on her once to release her, and then we'll click on her a second time to indicate that to add her back to the availability pool. Hit save. For vani, there is an option for marking your availability or when you can work based on availability instead of unavailability. Under this system, it was configured to use unavailability, but there is also the option for availability. I would say that unavailability is the more popular because people are typically more available than not on average, it would appear. But when you're looking at this view, SMMware is translating their unavailability into availability because that is probably the most convenient for you to work with. For Suzanne, so there is a setting for the end of day. So you can say that the end of day is 5 p.m. if you wanted to, but the catch comes when you say that most of the time. So if you occasionally have people working past 5 p.m., then if you set it for 5 p.m., there's not going to be a way to indicate that they're going to be there until 6 or 7 or whatever like that. So when you set the high end, you do have to account for what you consider to be the latest that you want to show people as working as. And if it's extremely rare to go past it, I suppose you could say that the latest date is 5 p.m. and then you can just put in the description. If it's very rarely going to be the case, we're going to work till 8, and you can say, hey, we're actually working till 8. So you do have to consider, like not just the usual, but like the extreme or the maximum. So those are the three different approaches for managing the attendees: the direct, the invite, and the availability. And it also concludes the section for the calendars. So we've talked about, again, tasks, notes, calls, and then calendars. So to wrap things up, I'll just talk about some of the integrations that SMMware offers. We work with Mailchimp, which is a mass emailing product. So if you want to send out an email to all the people you know in real estate, SMMware will, once it's set up, will copy over contacts from the contact section here to Mailchimp, and they will be tagged based on the category they're in. So if they're under Realtor here in the Contact Manager, then under Mailchimp, they will So we're looking at the listing of clients right now. I'll change it over to contacts. So now I'm in the Mailchimp interface, I should mention. And hopefully that'll pop up soon. But meanwhile, what you'll see is a listing of all the different email addresses and the categories that were assigned to them within SMMware. There we go. So this was under contact. This contact was under accounting and auctions or consignment. If somebody was marked as referring business to you, that becomes a tag as well. And let's see, there's a few more examples like senior services and so on and so forth. And if you allow contact or clients to be copied over, they will be marked as current clients, past clients, etc., or possible clients. And your associates can also be copied over. That way, if you ever need to send out a mass email to all the employees, then you would be able to use Mailchimp to do that without having to worry about gathering up a list. So every time you make a new entry, that entry gets copied over to Mailchimp, assuming you have the integration set up. We also integrate with Google Calendar. And what that means is that the entries that you create in SMMware will be copied over to Google Calendar. But I should emphasize that you still use SMMware for planning, because SMMware is aware of employees, when they can work, or the client's addresses and things like that. So Google is really just a place that you go to look at the finished product as a place to say, hey, where's this event going to be? And lastly, we have integrations with QuickBooks, both desktop and on QuickBooks Online. And what that means is that you can copy over hours, expenses, or invoices, and other things that are needed by those, like the vendors, the clients, and of course the employees. So that way you can use that as payroll. And if let's say you're using QuickBooks for payroll, I'll look at a given employee. So we have some entries that might pop up. So if an entry needs to be copied over, it's going to have QBO add. And if it has already been copied over, it's going to have this green icon, the circular one with QB on it. And in addition to copying over one line item at a time, normal day-to-day operations, you'd probably use this button here. What you would do is use the filter to narrow down the list to what you want, and then you would tell SMMware to copy over all the items. I'm just going to copy over one item. That way I don't have to re-enter a whole bunch of test data. All right, so then it just tells you that it created an hourly entry over at QuickBooks. No errors, all is good. And there's a similar functionality under the Invoice Manager. So you can copy over or copy over invoices to QuickBooks as well. And over the course of the summer, we're going to be working with integrations with something called Zapier, which is kind of a middle ground where you talk to Zapier, or SMMware will talk to Zapier, and then Zapier will talk to various payroll services. So if you're using Paychecks or other, once we have this in place, you'll be able to communicate information directly from SMMware into these other services. For vani, when you're getting started with SMMware, I definitely recommend that people pick a certain area to get started with. So some people start with entering hours, some people start with the calendar, and it's going to, which one of those you pick is going to be, it depends on which one you think is the most highest priority for your company. But definitely it's a stepwise approach that I would recommend. People who try to do everything all at once usually have a tougher go of it. So hopefully, Vani, that answers your question. We can, there's a few things that we can do in SMMware that maybe hide some of the functionality that you're not using, things that we can turn off. So we could have a conversation about what you need to do that way. So to sum things up, I'm going to go to the SMMware.com website. If someone, for Sue Elliott, yes, you can import clients and contacts from QuickBooks into SMMware. Going into, this particular SMMware is hooked up to QuickBooks Online. It's a similar process for the QuickBooks desktop. And what I would do is I'd come down to the section on clients, and you can do a test run, and it'll tell you what would happen if you did a live run. And then you actually can do a live run once you're satisfied that everything is as it should be. But again, the answer is yes. You can import information from QuickBooks into SMMware, and particularly you can import a list of clients, vendors, and employees. So we're not trying to bring in every piece of information that might be in QuickBooks, but those three areas in particular. If someone was to become interested in trying SMMware, you get the first 30 days for free. And here are the different pricing levels, and they are dependent upon how many users you have. And then if you would like some training, we have 2 people who are accredited as trainers in SMMware. And Brenda, I think we're attending today. You can say hi, maybe, if you would. So we have information about Brenda and Liz here. It's under the company section. And there's no setup fees and no long-term contracts. It's simply a month-to-month subscription. We also have a YouTube channel. This webinar will actually be posted to the YouTube channel either later today or tomorrow. But mainly we have the various videos here on specific sections. So we've got about 30 videos here on various topics like sales features and entering clients and jobs and so on and so forth. So this is also a valuable learning area. I might as well mention that we have a help section in SMMware that is context sensitive. So that if you're in a given section and you pull up help, it'll provide some information about that page. And we also have manuals. If you go to the company section of SMMware, you can go to the manuals area, and we have a manual here for administrators, team leads, team members, and we have a quick start guide and a few other supporting materials. All right, and so that pretty well wraps things up for today. Again, we've looked at the basic features within SMMware and talked a little bit about where SMMware is going next and how you can get started if you're ready to. And I thank you for your time today. If anybody has any questions that would like to catch up with me on that, it's bjacobs@SMMware.com. You can go to the SMMware.com homepage. You can see the phone number here. And you can also schedule a one-on-one demo if you need further information. Again, thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from some of you. Meanwhile, everybody have a great day. Bye now.